Hello and welcome to May It Please the Court, Oral Arguments in COVID-19 Times. I'm Leah Spero, Chair of the Committee on Appellate Courts for the California Lawyers Association. And today I'll be interviewing Susan Gelmis, the Chief Deputy Clerk of Operations at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. First off, Susan, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you're very busy right now.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Leah.
And I wanted to start with an overview of the calendars that have been affected so far. California started the shelter-in-place rules in mid-March. What were the first calendars to be affected?
So we actually had 7 different courtrooms over 4 different cities that were happening the weeks of March 23rd and March 30th. So it was pretty immediate that we had calendars that were impacted directly by this, including Seattle and Las Vegas, which was a district courthouse and law school sitting.
And since that happened, have all of the cases gone to a virtual setting where video is at least some component, or were there some arguments that happened by telephone in the beginning?
So in the beginning, it was really a scramble to figure out because everything was happening so fast. Some of the panels in those 2 weeks decided that they were just going to reschedule all of their non-submitted cases. We don't hear argument in every argument calendar case. So they were still submitting cases as they normally would. But some panels said, we're just going to reschedule everything. Nobody knew at that point how long this would last or whether they would be ready to go forward with remote arguments. We had 2 panels during those 2 weeks that went forward with some or all of their non-submitted hearings by video and or telephone. And the rest of them, most of the cases have since been rescheduled for later in April or May, and they will also be remote participation arguments.
And for this week, it is a calendar week, at least in some places.
Yes.
Are the calendars for this week being held in the calendar block in which they were scheduled, or are they being done on a one-off basis?
So the one-off is by panel, basically by courtroom. We have 4 courtrooms scheduled this week, 2 in Pasadena, 2 in San Francisco. 2 of those panels decided they were going to reschedule any non-submitted hearings, and the other 2 are going forward with some or all of their scheduled hearings at their designated original time. So basically just, each panel makes its own decision, and we've now had panels decide that through the month of May.
Okay, so the May calendar cases, again, are still going forward as noticed, but the attorneys for those cases will be notified about any changes based on their panel's preference.
Right, and so for each panel, we've already issued notices now in all of the cases through our 8 May sittings, which are the weeks of May 4th and May 11th in a variety of cities. Each panel has made a decision about, only one panel is going to reschedule all of their non-submitted cases. All the rest of them are planning to go forward with remote arguments, and parties have received notices in each of those hearings so that they know whether they're going to get rescheduled or heard remotely.
And has the en banc process been affected? Have you had any remote en banc hearings, or are those still up in the air?
Those have not been heard. We had some scheduled in March that got moved because that was actually the week that the shelter in place started, was when those were supposed to happen. Originally, they were moved to June because they happened during our quarterly court meeting weeks. And it seems likely that those will get moved to September because we just don't have the same ability to do those remotely in as effective a way because there's 11 judges involved. So I don't think there's a plan to do those remotely.
Okay, and what about motions panels? They don't always hold oral argument, but have they done any remote oral argument since the shelter in place?
No, and that's just because there hasn't been a need for an oral argument in a motions panel setting since this began. I'm assuming that if there was a need, we would certainly be able to set that up remotely for them. We've actually done that before under other circumstances.
Great. And have all of the oral arguments that have happened remotely been live streamed and already saved to the Ninth Circuit website for people to view?
Yes. Yes, they're all available and they're live streamed at the time, yes.
Okay, I'll pause here to show where one can go to see the oral arguments. First of all, we'll go to the home. This is the Ninth Circuit public site. To get live streamed oral arguments, they'll appear here, or you can go to the sidebar over on the left, and usually they would be listed by courtroom if they were happening that day.
Correct.
And then there's the archived audio and video here, which you can search by case name and number, and then they appear in reverse chronological order here, and you can listen or watch.
Right. So if you want to see what some of these remote hearings have looked like, you can just go to any of the ones that are from since March 23rd.
Great. That's a good resource for attorneys who are appearing. I definitely recommend watching some of the videos to get a sense of how it goes.
And frankly, that's a great resource for preparation for an argument, even in normal times. But yes, certainly to see what a video or telephonic oral argument looks like, this is a great resource.
So while we're on the screenshots here, I thought I'd show what the scene looks like, and you've shared some screenshots. We have, first of all, let's see if we can get it. Here, let me get to this one. This is the courtroom deputy's view, correct?
Correct. So in the courtrooms themselves, and we are running all of these right now out of a San Francisco courtroom or a Pasadena courtroom because we have the most video equipment there. So even Seattle calendars or other calendars are going to be run this way in terms of the physical courtroom. The only people who are actually in the courtroom are the courtroom deputy and the AV tech. All of the judges, all of the lawyers are remote. This is the view from the courtroom deputy's desk. They see, the courtroom deputy is the one who starts and ends the session, bangs the gavel, and runs the clock, the timer. And this is what the courtroom deputy sees, the three judges along the top and the attorney that's arguing at the bottom.
Okay, great. And then I'll show the screenshots. Here on the right-hand side, this is what the advocate sees, correct?
Correct. This is what the attorneys will see if they are by video. They are looking at the clock in the upper left hand, the timer. They're looking at all three judges, and then they see the other advocates on their case, but only for their case.
And then you had pointed out to me, this shows someone's joining by phone.
Correct.
And then this is the screenshot for the judges, correct?
Correct, and I will definitely point out that the judges have a much better resolution than what you see there. This is just what my tech was able to give me. But on their screens, the judges see this very clearly. What the judge is looking at is the timer and the other two judges along the top, and then the attorney who's arguing at the bottom.
Great, okay. Well, I'll keep these up for a moment while we talk about the ins and outs of the remote oral argument. For each of these, have at least some of the participants appeared by video? I think you said that there have been always at least some participants.
Well, apparently we've had some that were all video, some that were all telephone, and some that were mixed. So we've had kind of a mix of different options. The attorneys have the option of which one they want to do. The judges have all been by video so far, but they have a telephone option as well.
Oh, great. And then have you seen a trend in how attorneys are appearing? Would you say, you know, the majority of attorneys appear by video, or is it truly a mix of phone and video?
What my tech tells me is that it's been approximately equal, maybe 60% video and 40% phone. So more equal than I would have expected.
Okay, very good. And then let's go over the time clock that's up in the corner here, and it's on the judge's view and the advocate's view. So does the time clock function like it usually does at a live oral argument, where the total time is set for the appellant and the attorney has to keep an eye on their own rebuttal time?
Correct. That what you're actually seeing there is the clock in the courtroom that the courtroom deputy is running. So that is the same as what you would experience in the courtroom. We set it for each side. And yes, for the appellant, if they want to reserve rebuttal time, they need to keep an eye on the clock. Or if they're sharing time, they need to keep an eye on the clock unless the panel orders otherwise.
Perfect. Okay. And then when there are multiple cases on the same calendar, do all of the attorneys check in the morning at the same time, and then the ones that are later in the calendar have to wait in a waiting room for however long it takes for their case to be called?
I don't think they're in a waiting room, but yes, we check in all counsel for all cases 30 minutes before the start of court, like we would in person. Courtroom deputy will check them in, make sure everybody's there. And then we mute everybody whose case it isn't. And then we do take a couple of minutes. This is one of the adjustments that we've needed to ask the panels to make, is to take a couple of minutes between cases just to make sure that we still have everybody online for the next case.
Right, that makes sense. And then that leads to the horror scenario. What happens if an attorney drops off either during their argument or while they're waiting for their argument to be called?
So the good news is that it's been very infrequent that it's happened at all. And it's only happened once during somebody's case. So that's the really good news, is that it's super infrequent. And the still not so bad news is that there's a tech in the courtroom for each one of these, and they have the phone numbers, they have the email addresses for each attorney, and they notice it right away if somebody's come off, and they will work with them to get them back on. In the one instance where it happened during somebody's case, the panel just paused and waited. Everybody understands that these things can happen, so it's pretty rare though.
Okay, that is reassuring. And how far before the oral argument does the AV department contact the attorneys, let them know how this is going to work, when to call in or appear by video?
So what we've been doing, I've got sort of a two-pronged approach that we've been doing. One is we have courtroom deputies assigned to each courtroom in advance. And so the courtroom deputy is usually the first person that's going to reach out to all of the lawyers and get their contact information for our AV techs, talk to them a little bit, answer the questions they can answer. And then between 1 and 2 weeks in advance of the hearing, the AV tech will reach out to each attorney as well. And if they're going to do it by video, they'll help them get set up. They'll run a test with them. They'll make sure that everybody's comfortable, that they know what they're doing. Even if they're doing it by phone, we can certainly run a test with them. We send them some helpful tips about doing it by phone. So the courtroom deputy and the AV techs are really doing a lot of one-on-one reaching out, making sure everybody knows exactly what they need to do. And we're just doing that in every single case that is going to go forward.
Okay, very good. And what is some general advice, if you have it, having seen these happen already, for attorneys who appear before the court?
So the first thing I want to reassure everybody is that you can appear by video without any special equipment. And I think even some of our judges really were apprehensive about that. Certainly a lot of the attorneys are apprehensive about that. All you need is a camera-equipped device. We've had judges who have appeared from home on their iPad. It is really, and on laptops. You don't need any special equipment. It's something that we can really get people connected with very easily. So that's my own reassurance. I'm going to look at the notes that my tech gave me about specific advice, because they have gained some good experience on this. So if you're doing it by phone, it's best to use a landline because those are less likely to get, to dropped calls or have issues with connection. Know how to mute and be prepared to go to a handset if you're having difficulty understanding the judges or the other people participating. If you're doing it by video or hands-free audio, choose a room that has carpets, bookcases, couches, as opposed to a bare room with hardwood floors that's going to echo a lot more. I had an attorney who had done this, had sent one of our law clerks some tips, or somehow the law clerk got it, that if you are at your desk and you have a lot of papers on your desk, cover them with a towel. Just to try to, mute the extra sounds and avoid things like paper shuffling. So those are two big ones. Keep the speakers on your computer or your device as low as is comfortable. If you need more volume, think about a headphones or a headset rather than upping the volume on your speakers, because that's going to bring in the ambient noise more. Try not to have a window behind you like I do. Not a good thing to do, because you need to be well lit. And if you've got light coming in, I mean, mine's to the side, but not the best lighting. Better to have a simple background than a lot of complexity. Dark colors and light colors tend to fade into each other over video. So avoid really dark colors on black because it'll come out black. One is more of a request than a tip, but if you have co-counsel who would normally be sitting at counsel table with you, but they're not actually arguing, please don't share the information with them to join the call or the video. Have them watch the live stream and be connected with you in some other way if possible, because we're already managing a lot of different people at once over the telephone and or video, and we just don't want extra people on that if we can avoid it. Certainly people can watch the live stream from wherever. So
that's good advice. Okay, I'll add some general wisdom that I collected from Appellate blogs on this topic, and some of it seems very obvious, but apparently it needs repeating. One is to power up the device that you'll be using to appear and to have a power cord handy just in case, because the video applications can take a lot of power. Another is to silence your devices, all of your devices, and to turn off the notifications on whatever device you're using for the oral argument. Also, dress as you would to appear in court in person, and don't dispense with the typical formalities of oral argument. It's still a professional endeavor. And be prepared for a colder bench, because judges might not feel as comfortable jumping in with questions. I don't know how many panels that has held true for, but certainly if the panel is seeming like a cold bench, then the advice is to pause more throughout the argument, and certainly after you finish any particular topic in your argument, to give the judges some space to jump in.
That's an excellent point. And I don't know offhand whether they have been colder benches or not, but certainly I would echo the advice to pause more than you otherwise might, because it may be that a judge is about to ask a question and you just can't tell because of the odd sort of, makeup of how this works.
Right. And the last one was to have colleagues mute you by video and phone so you can get used to the format. And that seems very practical as well.
Very good idea. Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to end with just getting your institutional perspective on this. And I'll start by saying that the Ninth Circuit was well positioned to transition to remote oral arguments because judges have appeared by video and telephone before, and all of the arguments were already live streamed and saved online. But it's hard to replicate the in-person experience. How are the judges feeling about the remote oral argument experience so far?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. I mean, first, there are judges who really were apprehensive about whether this would work, not about whether, it was okay to do, but, what it would technically happen. And I think those judges are really seeing and sharing with each other their experience that it works really well. And so I think that's an interesting sort of change in perspective. And, certainly all of our judges are very grateful that we have the equipment and the staffing and the know-how to do this so that we don't just come to a screeching halt and we're able to actually have these cases get heard and keep going with the work. So there's no judge that is grumbling about this being the way we're doing this right now. They're really glad that we're able to do it. Will they be more likely to want to do it when it's no longer necessary? We've talked about it with our judges over several years, actually, about whether they want to make it more available in broader circumstances than they have in the past. And I think the answer has always been and will always be, if somebody has a reason why they would want to appear remotely, they should file a motion once the case has been calendared and, see what the judges say. Most of the time, our judges are pretty accommodating, and I don't see that changing. I think certainly judges and most lawyers prefer in person when they can get it, because it is just a better experience. And I know in the very beginning of this, when we before the shelter in place happened, but it was clear things were happening very quickly, and it was clear that travel was at least going to be an issue. We were offering lawyers originally the option of appearing remotely rather than having to travel. But that still they had the option to appear in person for our March 23rd and March 30th hearings. And there were lawyers who said to me, I would far prefer to do it remotely because of either my health situation or because I have to travel from somewhere far. But if I have the option of appearing in person, I feel like I need to do that for my client. And so I don't think we were actually, I think that's a concern when you have choices, that's going to be a concern as well. So all in all, I think certainly everybody is getting the sense that this is doable and it works, and it's great to know that we have that. I don't know that it's going to necessarily change the preference for in-person for either judges or lawyers going forward.
Okay, very good. That answers all of my questions for today. I really appreciate it. Do you have any parting thoughts on these remote oral arguments that we should cover?
I would just say that, definitely take advantage of when the courtroom deputy reaches out to you, take advantage of when the AV techs reach out to you to answer questions that you might have. And also that right now, because we have so many staff that are teleworking, rather than calling the court with questions, we do have an email address where we are answering general questions. It's called questions@ca9.uscourts.gov, and please feel free to reach out there as well. And
that's great. I will attest that the staff has been very quick with the email responses, and I had some filing issues and it was resolved really quickly. So I know that, the staff is working overtime on this and is very responsive. So it's true, you will get a response from your email.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for your time, and for anyone who's viewing this, be safe and be healthy, and take care, everyone.